Tension and uncertainty swept through the Philippine Senate after a dramatic security crisis forced lawmakers, employees, and journalists into lockdown as gunshots echoed around one of the country's most important government institutions. The incident unfolded during an already explosive political standoff involving Senator Ronald, Bato Dela Rosa, a close ally of former President Rodrigo Duterte and one of the most controversial figures tied to the Philippines' anti-drug campaign. What began as a tense day filled with rumors, security alerts, and political accusations quickly escalated into chaos, leaving the nation stunned and raising serious questions about security, accountability, and the growing political divide inside the country. For days leading up to the incident, speculation had been building around reports that legal authorities could move against Dela Rosa in connection with the ongoing International Criminal Court investigation into the Duterte-era war on drugs, the INVIS. Litigation has remained one of the most politically sensitive issues in the Philippines, dividing lawmakers, government officials, and the public itself. Supporters of the former administration continue defending the anti-drug campaign as necessary to restore order and fight criminality. Critics, however, argue that thousands of deaths linked to the operation demand accountability and independent investigation. As rumors intensified, Dela Rosa appeared at the Senate amid growing fears that authorities could attempt to arrest him. His arrival immediately transformed the Senate into the center of a political confrontation unlike anything seen in recent years. Security inside the complex became visibly tighter. Armed personnel were stationed around entrances and hallways, while Senate officials began restricting movement in certain areas. Journalists covering the developing situation described a growing sense of unease as confusion spread throughout the building. Dela Rosa himself appeared emotional and frustrated as he spoke before reporters. "When I am absent, you look for me. Now I am showing you here. I was blocked by the NDI. They wrestled me, and I ended up with these wounds. This is the Senate. They have no respect for the institution of the Senate." Ronald Bato Dela Rosa, his statement immediately triggered political shockwaves across the country. Supporters rallied behind him, accusing authorities of disrespecting the Senate and attempting to intimidate political opponents. Critics responded by insisting that no public official should be beyond the reach of the law, regardless of rank or political influence. The situation rapidly escalated from a legal controversy into a full-scale political crisis. Inside the Senate, lawmakers reportedly debated whether law enforcement agencies should even be allowed to conduct operations within Senate grounds. Some senators argued that the institution must remain protected from outside interference, while others insisted that the rule of law should apply equally to everyone. Meanwhile, tension inside the building continued rising. Witnesses described seeing armed security officers moving through corridors while communication among Senate personnel became increasingly urgent. Employees and visitors reportedly received warnings to remain alert as uncertainty spread throughout the complex. Then the situation suddenly turned terrifying. As evening approached, reports emerged that armed individuals had been seen around sections of the Senate compound. Security officials immediately tightened restrictions and ordered civilians away from sensitive areas. Moments later, gunshots rang out. Witnesses described hearing multiple shots echoing through or near the Senate premises, triggering panic among everyone inside the building. Staff members reportedly rushed for cover while security teams attempted to determine where the gunfire was coming from and whether an active threat had entered the complex. For several minutes, confusion dominated the scene. Some individuals hid behind walls and office furniture, while others attempted to contact family members and colleagues. Radio communications crackled continuously as armed officers secured entrances and hallways. People trapped inside the building later described hearing shouting, running footsteps, and frantic instructions from security personnel. The Philippine Senate, normally a place of political debate and legislative discussions, had suddenly transformed into a lockdown zone filled with fear and uncertainty. Outside the complex, heavily armed security forces began surrounding parts of the area as emergency protocols were activated. Roads near the Senate were monitored closely while investigators tried to determine whether the gunfire was connected to the ongoing standoff involving Dela Rosa. As rumors spread rapidly online, government officials attempted to calm the public. Authorities denied reports that a formal arrest operation triggered the violence and insisted that the situation was under control. Officials also urged the public not to spread misinformation while security teams continued assessing the threat. But despite those assurances, the political damage had already begun. The dramatic images of lawmakers sheltering inside locked buildings while gunshots echoed through the compound shocked millions of Filipinos watching the crisis unfold in real time. Political allies of Dela Rosa quickly blamed the administration and accused authorities of escalating tensions unnecessarily. Opposition figures, meanwhile, argued that the chaos reflected the dangerous consequences of refusing to address serious legal allegations directly. The incident deepened an already bitter political divide in the country. For supporters of Dela Rosa and Duterte, the Senate lockdown symbolized what they viewed as political persecution against figures tied to the previous administration. For critics, it represented a dangerous act, aimed by powerful officials to shield themselves from accountability. As investigators continued securing the Senate complex, questions also emerged regarding the presence of armed individuals around the building. How were they able to approach the premises during such a sensitive political standoff? Why did security preparations appear insufficient despite days of growing tension? And perhaps most importantly, could the crisis have been prevented entirely inside the Senate? Operations were severely disrupted as authorities conducted security sweeps across different floors. Certain sections of the building remained sealed off while investigators examined surveillance footage, witness statements, and communication records. Employees and journalists trapped during the lockdown later described an atmosphere of fear unlike anything they had ever experienced inside the institution. Some witnesses recalled hearing drilling sounds before the gunfire erupted. Others described seeing security officers rushing through hallways moments before emergency instructions were issued. For many Filipinos, the idea that gunshots could erupt around the Senate itself was deeply alarming. The Senate is one of the most important symbols of Philippine democracy, and the security crisis immediately raised fears about political stability and institutional safety. The confrontation also reignited national debate surrounding the legacy of the Duterte administration's anti-drug campaign. Human rights organizations have long demanded accountability for thousands of killings linked to the operation. International investigators continue examining whether crimes against humanity may have occurred during the campaign. Dela Rosa, who previously served as chief of the Philippine National Police during the height of the anti-drug operations, has repeatedly defended the campaign and denied wrongdoing. Supporters argue that the operation helped restore order and reduce crime. Critics insist that just C must still be pursued for victims and families affected by the violence. As the lockdown continued, the Senate increasingly became the center of a much larger national struggle, one involving political loyalty, legal accountability, and the future direction of Philippine democracy itself. The crisis also placed President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. under growing pressure. His administration faced demands to explain the security failures surrounding the incident, while also attempting to avoid further political escalation. Officials emphasized that investigations were ongoing and promised a full review of the events that led to the shooting. But the public remained deeply unsettled. The combination of political confrontation, armed security forces, and gunfire inside a major government institution created an atmosphere of instability that many Filipinos had not witnessed in years. Even after the immediate danger passed, uncertainty continued hanging over the Senate. Would authorities event to ally move to arrest Dela Rosa? Could additional confrontations occur? And how would the Senate leadership respond to increasing pressure from both political allies and critics? Those questions remained unanswered as investigators continued piecing together the exact timeline of the incident. What became clear, however, was that the Senate lockdown had evolved far beyond a simple security scare. It had become a symbol of the growing political tensions gripping the Philippines. The crisis exposed deep divisions over the rule of law, the power of political institutions, and the unresolved legacy of the Duterte-era drug war. It also demonstrated how quickly political conflict can escalate into a dangerous security emergency when mistrust and polarization reach extreme levels. For many observers, the most disturbing aspect of the incident was not simply the gunfire itself, but what it revealed about the state of national politics. a confrontation that began with legal uncertainty and politicking. Accusations eventually led to panic, lockdowns, and armed chaos inside the halls of government. And while investigations continue, the impact of the incident is already being felt across the country. Political alliances have hardened. Public debate has intensified, and concerns over institutional stability continue growing. Even now, the Senate shooting and lockdown remain one of the most dramatic political security incidents in recent Philippine history. The images of frightened employees taking cover or armed officers securing corridors and lawmakers trapped inside the Senate complex have become powerful reminders of how fragile political stability can become during moments of extreme confrontation. For the Philippine public, the incident was more than just another political controversy. It was a warning about how deeply divided the nation has become, a warning about the dangerous intersection of politics, power, and legal accountability, and a warning that unresolved PC, political battles can quickly spiral into crises with consequences far beyond the walls of government itself.